Mr. Trump has threatened Mexico. He has threatened to impose tariffs on goods coming into the United States from Mexico. And he has also promised might even be a better word, to deport millions of people living in the United States back into Mexico from which they entered the United States. And I want to talk to you about what the economics of this are, and I thought it might be useful to divide them into what the impact of such activities, if Mr. Trump is able to carry them through, a very much an open question. The leader of Mexico has said this is none of it that's going to happen, so she's been very clear about that. But we'll see. But I wanted to show you what the economics would be for both Mexico and the United States. So let's start with Mexico. There, I think it's fair to say that if Mr. Trump carries this out, the effects on Mexico will be more than negative. They will be disastrous. Here in the United States, they'll be short of disastrous, but they'll be negative also. So I'll leave it to you to try to understand why Mr. Trump would be pushing these ideas. So let's go. First with Mexico. Mexico relies on something economists call remittances. That's a portion of the income earned by people who are Mexican by birth, who are now in the United States, living and working here, but who save money and send a portion of their earnings back home to their families, many of whom are still living in Mexico. Put together, since we're talking 10 to 15 million people, this is an enormously important income for the whole country, not just for the people who get it, but those people who get that remittance then go to the local village where they live or the city where they live and spend that money, generating income for lots of others. They will lose some or all of this very bad for Mexico. Number two, one of the advantages of the North American Free Trade Association, NAFTA, were the deal made by Mexico, Canada, and the United States precisely to allow goods and services to flow freely among these three countries to the advantage of all of them, which is why all of them got together, wrote that agreement, signed that agreement, revised that agreement under Mr. Trump, by the way, who signed the agreement knowing full well that the wages in Mexico being much lower than those in the United States, it would be an invitation to companies to set up, not in the United States, but in Mexico, because they could pay lower wages and without a cost other than transportation, ship whatever they produced in Mexico into the United States without any worry of a tariff. Mr. Trump is proposing to violate that agreement, which he signed, in order to deprive Mexico of being able to ship lots of goods into the United States without paying a tariff. He's going to hit them with a tariff. They won't be able then to export without a tariff. That means Americans buying Mexican goods, for example, automobiles produced in Mexico, and there's lots of them, the price of those will go up because you'll have to pay the tariff, which is a tax on top of whatever it costs to pay for the car's production itself. Wow. Here's a double whammy. The Mexicans are going to throw huge numbers of people out of work because they can't sell the same goods in the United States at a higher price because Americans have to pay the tax, the tariff that their president is imposing on them. And of course, if you drive up the costs of vehicles coming in from Mexico, who are a major portion of vehicles on the road in the United States, you're going to worsen inflation here, which you're not supposed to do. It was the inflation that helped elect Mr. Trump, and now he's doing something that'll worsen it here. investments won't go to Mexico the way they have because they won't have the tariff-free entree into the United States. And of course, if we deport people, we're sending millions of people back into Mexico just as they are laying off people because the tariff hurts their exports, which means they're going to have an unemployment problem beyond anything we can even imagine. And with all these companies cutting back, with all these unemployed coming in, they're going to need things to help them through this awful period, just as fewer taxes are paid to the Mexican government. You put it all together, it's a disaster for Mexico. And for the United States, it's no fun either. First of all, with millions of Mexicans and Central Americans deported, a huge number of jobs are going to be open. Those people were working, the overwhelming majority, but they were working at the worst jobs in the country, the lowest paid. It's a very open question whether millions of Americans are going to want to have the jobs being vacated by deported immigrants. So there may be a real shortage of jobs. And you know what that'll do? A shortage of people to fill low-wage jobs. It'll mean native-born Americans will have to fill those jobs, and they will demand, because they're used to it, higher wages. And if those employers want workers, they're going to have to pay those wages. And we all know what those employers are going to do if they have to pay higher wages to American native-born workers. They're going to raise their prices. Inflation again. American companies that were making a profit bringing Mexican goods into the country, they're going to lose that business. Oh, my goodness. Yeah, the government here in the United States will get more revenue, the tariffs. But you know what else has to be figured in? Every country, every company around the world is realizing that the United States is now on one of these America First crusades. It's not safe to do trade with the United States. They may cut you off at any moment by hitting your product with a tariff. Better look for markets elsewhere. Better focus your future elsewhere. The damage to the American economy from all of this, incalculable, except that we know big time. So yeah, Mr. Trump is eager to be the president with a tough guy who can slam foreigners, deport them, hit them with a tariff. It looks good politically. Economically, a big fat disaster. On December 18th of 2024, workers at the Baltimore, Maryland coffee shop Common Ground Cafe voted to join a union, the United Food and Commercial Workers Local 27. What makes this remarkable is that the cafe was already a worker co-op. What we're beginning to see is that co-ops and unions are coming closer and closer together. A few years ago, the United Steelworkers, a big union here in the United States, took the lead and made deals with the worker co-op known as Mondragon, the big worker co-op in Spain. And they brought that concept here to the United States. And we now have a whole bunch of unionized worker co-ops. And the reason is not far to search for. Unions have a century or more of experience struggling with employers, getting rights, privileges, power for workers. It's information invaluable to anyone trying to form a worker co-op. And unions can help worker co-ops realize their dream. But worker co-ops, in a sense, can do something for unions. First of all, worker co-ops have their members join unions. They don't see them as enemies the way corporations do. So it'll be easier to organize people into unions if they are co-ops. But the union does work for the workers, has to struggle against the bosses, the co-op, which is always undercutting them. That doesn't happen when you have a worker co-op, because the co-op members who make the decisions and the union members are the same people. There isn't a fight among them. They may have their disagreements, but it's a disagreement of people who have the same position. They don't just work at the enterprise, they run it. And that is what unionists have always dreamed of as the ultimate of what they're striving to achieve.